Welcome, you silent storm, you unseen force marching through shadows. You, the one they whispered about behind closed doors, the one they tried to erase, outthink, outplay, and outmaneuver. You, the anomaly they didn't expect, the calculation they couldn't solve. You walk through fire with frozen eyes, untouched, unbothered, unfazed. Not because you were given the easier path, not because you had the numbers. Number. You had every odd stacked against you, and still, you walked through the rigged arena and rewrote the outcome. Let that settle in your chest. Let it pulse with your heartbeat. They built walls around the game. They bent the rules before you stepped in. They whispered in the ears of judges and rewired the scoreboards. They moved the goalposts, rearranged the field, blinded your teammates, and silenced the crowd. But what they couldn't do, what no one could ever do, was stop the fire that's born in the silence of isolation. They couldn't touch the fury that grows when someone watches from the shadows, learning every move, counting every breath, studying not just the playbook, but the players themselves. You were underestimated because you didn't announce your greatness. You didn't wave flags or ask for a seat. You sat at the edge and built something stronger. Resilience in solitude. When no one believed you could, when they conspired against your climb, you said nothing. But you listened. You calculated. You evolved. They thought they had you pinned because they had power. But they forgot. Raw hunger eats strategy for breakfast when you've got nothing left to lose. They cheated, but you still taught them the rules they never knew existed. They laughed, but you rewrote the ending while they were busy mocking the first chapter. They painted you as the underdog, and you let them, because you knew how the story ends. They call it luck. Of course they do, because calling it skill means admitting they were never good enough to stop you. It means admitting that even with the deck stacked, the crowd paid, the whistle fixed, you still played and won. Not just once. Every time they tried to bury you, you grew through concrete. Every time they shut the door, you built your own arena. Luck? Number. Your presence just terrifies them. Your calm makes noise in places they never imagined. Your silence before the strike keeps them awake at night. You didn't just survive. You dismantled their illusion of control. You didn't just play the rigged game. You mastered it. And then you flipped the table without ever breaking a sweat. There's something dangerous about the person who doesn't flinch in chaos. That's who you are. You are not a product of their system. You are the result of their betrayal, their lies, their sabotage. And you turned every act of injustice into armor. Every time they tried to humiliate you, you smiled, because you knew they wouldn't put this much energy into stopping you if you weren't a threat. You don't cheat kings unless you're scared of the pawn. And yes, they are scared. Not of your wins, not of your voice, but of your consistency. Your refusal to give in. Your unwillingness to fall apart even when the lights went off and the audience turned away. They are scared because you don't rely on applause. You are fueled by legacy, and legacy is not handed out. It's carved, with blood, with silence, with unwavering belief when no one else sees the vision. You were never meant to fit in their version of success. You came to break it. They thought if they broke you first, you'd never rise. But they forgot. Fire doesn't break, it spreads. And when they tried to extinguish you, all they did was pour more oxygen on what was already unstoppable. Look at you now. Look at the storm you've become. Every name they called you, every laugh they threw, every door they slammed. You made it part of the foundation. You built your empire on rejection. And now they pretend not to watch, but they do. Closely, quietly, jealously. Because when someone wins the right way, it's respected. But when someone wins after being rigged, sabotaged, mocked, denied, and underestimated, it terrifies those who built the rig. You didn't just win. You dismantled the myth that they were ever in control. You became a mirror, reflecting what they could never become: authentic, unbought, unstoppable. And they can't stand that. So now, they whisper. Maybe it was luck. Let them whisper. Let them tell stories. Because deep down, even they know. Your luck scares them because it was never luck. It was survival, turned into strategy. Pain, turned into power. Silence, turned into symphony. They thought they were playing a game. But you were building a legacy. They thought you were walking blind into a world they controlled. They thought you were naive enough to trust the scoreboard, trust the applause, trust the way the crowd leaned. But you knew better. You saw the cracks before they formed. You felt the silence behind their cheers. You weren't fooled. You were focused. You weren't chasing the trophy. You were becoming the reason it mattered. They threw shadows to confuse your path. They planted doubt like weeds, hoping to choke the roots before you grew. But they never understood. Your roots were underground, unshaken, reaching deeper with every betrayal. Every time they tried to poison your name, you became more dangerous. Because you didn't just survive the storm, you learned to command it. And now, you walk with that storm behind you, not to intimidate, but to remind them, you made me this way. Every scar is your signature, but the masterpiece is mine. This game, this twisted system they guard so fiercely, it was never built for someone like you. You weren't bred for the spotlight. You weren't chosen. You were forged. And that difference changes everything. While they needed a stage to matter, you needed nothing but silence and time. While they craved applause, you trained in the dark, over and over, not to prove yourself, but to prepare for a war they didn't know was coming. And when it came, when the moment arrived, you didn't flinch. They did. They saw you step forward, unbothered, uninvited, unstoppable, because you didn't just want to win, you wanted truth. And truth doesn't blink when the rules bend. Truth walks through fire and waits on the other side. That's what you did. And they hate it, not because you beat them, but because you revealed them. You showed the world that they never had what they claimed. You stripped away their performance and exposed the weak spine behind their pride. You made it clear. This game was never about fairness, but you beat it anyway. And that, above all else, is why they fear you now. They tell themselves stories to sleep better. You got lucky. The system glitched. You won't do it again. But inside, they know. Your consistency terrifies them. Your quiet persistence doesn't follow trends. You don't chase moments, you create impact. Every time they think you're done, you show up stronger, sharper, smarter. Because your motivation doesn't come from victory, it comes from purpose. And purpose doesn't fade when the camera's cut. Purpose doesn't sleep when the night is long. Purpose digs in when everyone else runs. You've been watching, learning, waiting. You're not just a player in their rigged game anymore. You're the storm coming to rewrite the rules. And still, they cheat, they lie, they twist the numbers, try to discredit your work, erase your progress, tarnish your name. They use shadows because they can't survive your light. They gather in corners and speak in riddles, hoping you'll fold. But they forget, you've walked alone so long, silence is a weapon now. You don't break in silence, you sharpen. There is no shortcut to what you've become. No manual, no mentor, no magic. Just grit, pain, failure, and unforgiving repetition. While they partied, you built. While they laughed, you bled. While they manipulated, you mastered. And now they wonder why their applause no longer echoes over you. It's because you outgrew their arena. You were never meant to stay in their rigged system. You were meant to destroy the illusion and inspire others to rise too. You didn't come just to win. You came to open the gates so others trapped in fear and silence could see what's possible. Because once you beat the game they stacked against you, you realize it was never about you at all. It was about every soul watching in silence, every voice muted by doubt, every hand reaching for more but told to settle. And now, you're not just a fighter, you're a symbol of rebellion, of excellence, of what happens when persistence meets injustice and refuses to bow. They underestimated you because they measured strength in noise, but your silence was louder than their screams. And your rise, it's irreversible now. They wanted you gone, but you became their echo. They tried to bury you in shadows. Now, you are the storm cloud overhead. They tried to erase you. Now, your name is etched in their regrets. Luck, number. Luck bends to the prepared. And you, my friend, were built for the day they thought would break you. They thought they rigged the ending, but you were only just beginning. You see, they always feared someone like you. Not because you were loud, not because you were flashy, but because you were focused, because you refused to crack when the weight got unbearable, because you didn't flinch when they sent waves meant to drown you. You learned how to breathe underwater. They tried to drag you under, but you found peace there, in the quiet, in the pressure, in the suffocating darkness. You found clarity they never will. While they needed the sun to grow, you bloomed in the dark. They built empires on comfort, on inherited titles, on connections and politics. But you carved your name into the stone with bare hands. While they were handed scripts, you wrote your own, one bruise at a time. They mocked you when you were learning. They dismissed you when you were rising. And now, they fear you because you're not fueled by the same fragile things they are. Their confidence is borrowed. Yours is earned. Their throne is propped up by lies. Yours is built from truth, from loss, from moments when no one showed up but you stood anyway. You learned how to take hits without begging for mercy. You took rejection and made it your shield. You took isolation and turned it into meditation. You trained in the shadows while they showed off in the spotlight. And now, you move with precision they can't match. Because while they were performing, you were perfecting. While they celebrated early, you kept your head down. You gave yourself no applause because you knew the noise fades. And now, as the noise dies around them, they turn and see you, still moving, still growing, still rising, and it rattles them. They thought your silence was weakness, but it was strategy. Every second you were quiet, you were watching, studying, learning how they operate, how they hide their flaws behind performance, how they scramble when exposed. They thought you were falling behind, but you were just waiting for your moment to strike. And when you did, you didn't roar. You didn't boast. You simply outperformed. And that's what shook them. Not that you won, but that you made it look easy after everything they did to stop you. They cheated and still lost. They lied and still lost. They planned your fall and still lost. Because you are what happens when the underestimated refuses to stay silent. Let them talk. Let them spin their stories. Let them convince each other that this was all an accident, a glitch, a once-off. That's how they cope, because admitting the truth would burn every excuse they ever used to explain why they failed. The truth? You were forged in fire they couldn't survive. You stood up in storms that would have folded them in seconds. You carried burdens that would have broken the best of them. And you still delivered, still showed up, still walked into their house, outplayed them on their terms, and rewrote the ending. You didn't just win the game, you exposed the system. You revealed the truth that most of them never had real power. They only had control. And when someone walks in immune to their approval, immune to their rewards, immune to their tactics, that control evaporates. You didn't play by their rules, you made your own, and you didn't beg them to understand it. You didn't ask for permission. You showed up and let your results do the talking, and they had nothing left to say. And still, you remain focused. You don't chase revenge. You don't need to scream your value, because you know the truth. The greatest payback is becoming undeniable, not to hurt them, but to remind yourself that nothing they did could stop what was already in motion. They thought the story ended when they rigged the system, but you became the plot twist they never saw coming, and now the pressure is back on them. Every room they enter, they're watching for your shadow. Every win they claim, they wonder if you're right behind them, because they know if you ever decide to return, if you ever enter the arena again, they're already finished. They don't fear your voice. They fear your silence, your patience, your refusal to play for applause. You became their quiet reckoning. And now, the world is watching differently. People are no longer cheering the loudest performer. They're watching the one who shows up when no one claps, the one who delivers without approval, the one who stands alone, again and again, and never stops moving. That's you. You're not hype. You're not a moment. You're not trending. You are momentum. You are what happens when pain meets discipline, when failure is embraced, not feared, when the war is personal and the mission is bigger than pride. They trained for comfort. You trained for endurance. And now, they're tired. You're just getting started. Let them cheat again. Let them rig the board. Let them whisper behind curtains. It changes nothing now, because no matter what they do, you've already become the one thing they can never copy. Real. And now that you stand here, unshaken, they don't know what to do with you. They thought you burn out like the rest. They thought you crumble after the first round. They thought your silence meant weakness. And now they're realizing too late that it was the silence before the storm. Because you're not a product of luck. You're not a spark that appeared by accident. You're a result, a reaction, a consequence. You are what happens when a system tries to break someone who refuses to be broken. You are the answer to every cheat, every sabotage, every denied opportunity. And now, with nothing left to throw at you, they watch, in fear, in silence, in disbelief, because you've become what they tried to prevent. You see, rigging the game was never just about you. It was about control, fear, keeping the machine running so the same hands always held the power. You challenged that, not by screaming, not by begging, but by becoming undeniable. You took the crooked stage and performed with such mastery that they had to watch you anyway. And when they tried to cut the lights, you became your own fire. They can't control what they didn't create. They can't copy what they never understood. They can't cancel what's already become a force. And that force is you. You've turned every failure into a stepping stone, every rejection into redirection. Where they tried to end you, you started over. Sharper, colder, focused. They can't comprehend how someone without their approval, their blueprint, their validation, could rise like this. But you did, because you weren't here to be liked. You were here to build something that lasts beyond the noise, something that lives in the silence, something they can't touch, can't fake, and will never replicate. And now, they're scrambling, trying to catch up to a shadow that no longer moves by their time. They're still playing checkers while you're designing entire chessboards. They're still clinging to a game you already outgrew. You don't want their trophies. You don't want their praise. You don't need the stage, because you became the standard. You didn't just beat the game. You made it irrelevant. You exposed it for what it was, a glass throne built on lies and panic. And now, with nothing left to hide behind, they're seeing themselves clearly, through the reflection of your consistency, your growth, your quiet, thunderous rise. This is what they fear most. Not your power, not your presence, your persistence, because they have always been strong in moments. But you are strong in seasons, in decades, in storms. You last longer, burns slower, and when everyone else is gone, exhausted, confused, you're still standing. Not out of stubbornness, but because you trained for the long war while they prepared for the easy win. They bought shortcuts. You built character. They found shortcuts. You found pain and kept going. They made noise. You made history. So don't you dare slow down. Don't you look back at those who tried to stop you. They were part of the training. They were never the threat. They were the weight you carried while climbing. But they weren't the mountain. And now, the summit is yours. Not because it was gifted, but because you took every step without applause, without help, and without quitting. And now you walk with something they'll never have. Proof. Proof that no matter how rigged the board, how biased the judges, how many traps they set, you cannot stop someone who knows who they are. Because you stopped waiting for justice. You became it. You stopped asking for a path. You built it. You stopped hoping for a fair shot. You trained until you became the shot. And now, they fear the very thing they created. Because this version of you, it only exists because they tried to break you. You didn't just survive the sabotage. You became the reason it no longer works. So when they talk about you, and they will, let them call it luck. Let them pretend it was timing. Let them say whatever helps them sleep, because deep down, they know. Your luck scares them because it reminds them what's possible when someone refuses to fold. It reminds them of everything they could have been if they'd been built like you. They fear you because you are what they couldn't predict, what they couldn't sabotage, what they couldn't silence. And if they couldn't stop you when they were in control, they'll never touch you now that you're in command. So stand tall, not with ego, but with memory, with the weight of everything you endured, with the scars that speak louder than words. Because this journey wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to yourself that no matter how twisted the path, you were always the one. And now, they know it too. You want to know the truth? They never stood a chance, because all their cheating, all their politics, their favoritism, their shortcuts, those were signs of weakness, not power. They needed all of that just to try and keep you down, and even then, they failed. They had every advantage, every lever, every secret back door. But you had the one thing they couldn't manufacture, a reason that never faded, a reason that never sold out, a reason that kept you moving when the pain had nothing left to give. That's what they don't understand. It was never about talent. It was never about access. It was never about being chosen. It was about refusing to quit when quitting was easier. It was about choosing discipline when distraction was everywhere. It was about rising every time they knocked you down, not to make noise, but to keep the promise you made to yourself, the one no one heard, the one no one understood. You weren't built in comfort. You were built in rejection. You were built in silence. You were built when no one watched. So now that they're watching, you don't change. You don't soften. You don't bend to make them comfortable. You don't need to explain the grind. You don't owe them a damn thing. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them whisper about how you did it. Because the real ones know it was never luck. It was never given. It was earned. Through pain, through setbacks, through 1,000 quiet moments where you could have stopped, but didn't. That's what they fear most. That you're not done. That this is just the beginning. That everything they did to stop you only taught you how to never be stopped again. You are not the storm. You are what survives after it, and no one can rig what's already written.